Transform.
Okay, everybody, we're going to get started in a second here. So first of all, welcome to our home. Thanks for coming out for the first conference on the couch. There's food, there's coffee, there's hot water for tea in the kitchen. Feel free to grab some at any point. Bathroom over here if you need to use it. So just want to say a few words about why we're doing the conference on the couch, the kind of idea behind it before we get started. So if you were there last night, I sort of talked about one of the things that I really wanted to do with Outsider is create spaces for conversation where people can really talk to one another. So I always knew that I wanted to have some sort of conference component to it. My background is also, I have a PhD from UT as of very recently. And I've been a programmer, so I kind of also selfishly wanted to kind of combine my two worlds of academia and art as well with this conference. And part of that was creating a space where other academics and artists could talk to one another and general audience people could talk to one another, because I feel like very often as academics we study people, we study stuff, and we never talk to those people, we never meet them. So this becomes an opportunity for that sort of cross-dialogue that oftentimes doesn't happen. But the other idea here was I didn't want to have like a traditional conference format, like people sitting at a table in some sterile room somewhere, and like the audience is over here, and there's like a spotlight on the speakers, because I wanted it to be more conversational, I wanted it to be more intimate, I wanted it to be more community-oriented. So that's why we're here in my living room, in PJ's living room, to try to create that sort of family atmosphere, because we are all part of this family together. So that's kind of the idea behind it. And the last sort of, I guess, thing to say about this too is each of the conference panels that we have going on this week, this one, tomorrow's, Your Nostalgia is thrilling. Strike through. Killing me, or is it killing? Strike
Killing, strike through,
thrilling.
Yeah.
Which is about queer art and HIV. And then Saturday we have a gender and performance panel, and each of those are leading into stuff that we have going on elsewhere in the festival. So today, of course, is queer music and subculture, and later this week, starting today with the Tribe 8 documentary, we have all sorts of stuff going on in honor of our first legacy awardees. Tribe 8. We have Lynnee here from Tribe 8. And we'll have 3 other members here from the band soon. So again, we have the documentary going on this afternoon, and then at 4 p.m. at SVT. And then tomorrow we have our award ceremony and our after party tribute to Tribe 8. So this conference kind of is the lead in to all of that stuff going on. And I will give it over to Paige, who is our moderator for this panel.
All right, thank you so much. And I just want to say thanks to Curran and PJ for creating this space and letting us invade your living room. I have 3 different questions that I'm hoping that we can engage with today. And the first question, I really want to function as a way for the artists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their work. But I'm going to set it up, and then, so I'm not introducing y'all before I start talking, but then I'm hoping this will kind of be an invitation for you to talk about your life and your work. So this question is inspired by 2 different things, and it's kind of like music subculture and academia rubbing up against each other in how I formulated this question. And in part, I was thinking about an Austin band, Power Snatch, which was in Power Snatch. Which, if you've never seen Power Snatch, you should really just go on YouTube and spend some time. But one of the things that is amazing to me about the members of Power Snatch is that I was also used to be on the board of Girls Rock Camp Austin, and you could not find 5 people who are involved in Girls Rock Camp, 5 more involved people than Kate Messer, Terry Lord, Cindy Widener, and Laura Creedle. And I love that long history of involvement in queer music subculture, and especially kind of thinking about that in terms of Riot Girl, where a lot of the critical response to Riot Girl was like, oh, these girls are gonna grow up and grow out of that, you know, like this is a passing childish, girlish phase. So I love this band from the 90s, like all these members still being so involved in youth music subcultures, and I love the way that really speaks back to, especially like these kind of narratives of like feminine involvement in subculture. And that was just like deeply meaningful to me. And you hear from the parents all the time at rock camp, like I send my daughter to rock camp because I want them to experience artists who have had different life trajectories than me. Like I want them to see that you can organize your life lots of different ways. And I want to put that against some ideas from queer theory, and specifically here I'm thinking about this book that I love, In a Queer Time and Place by Jack Halberstam. And in that book, Jack makes this argument that essentially one of the things that makes queer people queer is not so much who they have sex with, but how they organize their lives around, and specifically how they organize time and space. And that if there's like a heteronormative narrative about subculture, it's like, oh, subculture is something you do when you're a kid. And then you either learn how to make money from it or you abandon it. Right? But for queer people, one of the kind of pieces of our queerness is possibly a kind of lifelong not growing up, not retreating to the private sphere, but kind of staying connected to our subcultures. So I wanted to just invite the artists to kind of talk about their relationship to music subcultures, and I don't want to impose this like heteronormative narrative of like, what did you do in your youth and what do you do now? But just to kind of talk about maybe like what has queer music subculture meant to you, what has music subculture meant to you at different points in your lifespan, at different points in your life. So, Lynnee, will you start?
That's a lot of questions.
No, I was just trying to like repeat to myself that last bit. What does queer music subculture and
Like,
what else mean?
Like how have you been involved in it? Like how has it been kind of part of your life across your lifespan? So is it part of that typical narrative, like it's something you do when you're young and then you either make money from it or grow out of it, or is it something that's been meaningful across years and decades?
Right. Hi everybody, thanks for showing up. Yay. I'm Lynnee. I'm a singer for Tribe 8, or I was. Guess I always will be. The yeller, anyway. Not much of a singer. But yeah, I'd say that queer music's been a part of my life in that in the 70s when I was growing up in San Leandro, California. All my closest friends were Mexican fags, and we would go around school every day and we would try to pick out other, which I'm sure you can't say fags anymore, but we did at the time because we were reclaiming that shit, gay male homosexuals, and then we would come back and meet in the fucking quad or somewhere. And did you find any? Yes, I did. Yes, he's from Brazil, and he's hang out in the gay lawn. And then we had two gay hangout areas in 1975. One was like the rockers, and the other one was the disco queers. And the disco queers, they sat in the fucking smoking section. And there was like, they had cement ashtrays built into the fucking lunch tables, and they had they wore a lot of polyester, and we wore like fucking overalls. We had Marlboros in the pocket, and they smoked menthols, and there's a lot of differences. Steal each other's girlfriends and boyfriends back and forth, and cross the lines. It was very, but nobody cared that we were queer, so that was cool. But one of the things that we really met on was music. Like some of us would sit around and listen to Queen. And it was pointed out to me that actually the singer was gay. And I was like, because he's famous and he's obviously successful and very good. So how could And Chester, my pal, was like, no, dude, no, look. You know, and of course later I would look and go like, he's clearly a Castro clone, but nobody knew. Straight didn't know, Gator didn't know either. And so, you know, he was singing Killer Queen and all this shit, you know. All the lyrics there are just so obviously queer, but I didn't know. I was like, wow. But we loved it. We loved Day at the Races. We loved, you know, Night at the Opera, and then all the other things that we listened to. We queered because we looked at it and heard it through a gay lens, a queer lens, and then I would borrow my dad's car and pile all the bags in the car. Oh, sorry, gay male homosexuals. And then we'd go to the end up, which was a bar in San Francisco. It was a disco, and they would play Sylvester. Now, Sylvester was the first out trans queer person of color, like all these things, but like queer on fucking radio and being played through those speakers while we were on the dance floor, because we were listening to all the other people that were like on the radio that were straight people that were very happy to have our money, but I don't know that they necessarily loved us. You know, I went to a couple of shows where like I went to go get their autograph later. I'm not going to mention names, but I'd say they were kind of shitty. They were like, next, fucking dyke. That was their attitude, you know? And so when we heard that person singing to us,
Name names.
Sylvester. Oh, the names of the people that were kind of, that was just my opinion, I don't know.
That's fine.
And second bitch is here, oh my god, what's up? But anyway, I'm just saying that we connected through Sylvester first and Queen. And then, you know, in the 90s, or in the 80s, I like kind of checked out and did a lot of speeds, and then I was into Black Flag. And then I really tried to be like Henry Rollins, and then when I got clean, I was like, how am I going to be like Henry Rollins and be me at the same time? And that's when we started Tribe 8. And we were just like, we're just going to incorporate all the things, like all the different backgrounds that we had. You know, there was world beat, there was like metal, like just regular rock and roll in the 70s, Silas. Tantrum was like world beat bass player, and so was Mahia. And Leslie had been in an all-chick punk band in Colorado. And we just brought all that shit, and we filtered it through our lives and our experiences, and when we came together and we just played that, it was some weird mixture of shit that no one ever heard before, but that's where we met, and I feel like that's what I want to do, is like incorporate my own experiences, listen to what other people's experiences are, and like have them somehow like fluidly fit together. And it's going to be awkward at times, and it's going to be ugly, and it's going to be noisy, and some people are going to be offended, and you know what, but it's us. And so one of the beautiful things about collaborating in art and music that way for me was having family, which means that in a family, people are going to be pissed at you sometimes, but it's okay, because they're going to keep listening, they're going to keep coming back, and they're going to try to like incorporate you into their lives. So that's it. That would be my answer to your question.
I'll riff on a little like your sort of how you sort of. I'm Jonesy, a visual artist and filmmaker. I live in Los Angeles. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia in a really rural area and didn't come out actually until I went to art school. So when I started going to art school, things sort of just started coming together as far as what I was into, and I started leaving Philadelphia and going up to New York to the Pyramid Club and seeing like a lot of like early Sonic Youth and Babes in Toyland, and those were the kind of things that like when I experienced those, I was like, this really deeply resonated with me. There was something about the women that I just really kind of took to, as far as like I wanted to share my experience that was very similar to the anger that they were feeling, and just the songs and how they were, you know, how they did things. So I had a really good friend in art school who dated my best friend, Tammy Ray Carlin, and she kind of really got me involved with people who were queer and were just like starting to make music, and it was very new. Like there wasn't a lot of people in the past that you could look to that were doing like kind of turning this into something. So she kind of introduced me to Kathleen, who was started Bikini Kill in DC. I was still in Philadelphia, and so Fagbash, before I was in it, was this guy Paul Bonomo, and who's now Snacks and who lives in Berlin. He started it with a friend of his, and I saw like a really early show of Bikini Kill and an early incarnation of Fagbash at DC Space, and didn't realize like years later when I moved to San Francisco that I would actually join Fagbash. So I joined Fagbash years later, 2 or 3 years later, and I played bass, and definitely like my connection to music was always through the visual and being a visual artist, and that's still, I mean, in going past that, I mean, I was only in Fagbash for a couple of years, and then I kind of played music and did a lot of musical projects, but it informed my aesthetic in a way that's continued to this day, and there's always something deeply that I deeply connect to about how things were made and how we did things that I still continue to this day in my own work. So that's always been, that's a really important part of looking back and also looking forward with how that aesthetic evolves, how it changes over time, and just there was just a really a nice way that we did things that I'll always utilize in some capacity. That's sort of
Gretchen.
Hi, I'm Gretchen Phillips. But I really got to thank Curran and PJ and Annie for making this dream come true. Really, such a beautiful dream to have Austin's rich queer scene get to meet people and for us to show what we're made of, because it's so strong and it's so old, So I'm just very touched to get to be a part of this. My parents were musicians, folk musicians, singing protest songs that were political. So singing a song about injustice, well, I just grew up with that. And to me, queer music and punk music are an extension of that kind of, I need to express my emotion musically about this injustice and about these politics, sexual politics, whatever. I started out very folky, and also listened to Queen, absolutely, and even in Queen 1 and 2, and but I also was very deeply disturbed by Edgar Winter's albino-ness with that necklace, and David Bowie and Klaus Nomi on Saturday Night Live, and just that shit just really was a big problem for me. It made me extremely uncomfortable. And I was teased tremendously when I was a kid. I mean, I just was called a boy, and I'm from Texas, and shit is very gendered here, extremely so. And my relatives were terrified that I was going to turn out gay when I didn't even know what that meant. I just wanted some fucking male privilege, excuse me. I don't know. I mean, I'm not that horny right now. I just want some male privilege. But but my world really changed with, and Lynnee and I were talking about this last night, 1975, Janice Ian in a white suit all over television with at 17, just registering as so gay. And I fucking, all of a sudden, I wanted to do that. I wanted to be able to affect people musically. I dreamt that I could say something that stuck inside of people's minds, a song, a melody, a hook that would stay in there unbidden, where they wouldn't even want to be singing my lesbian manifesto, but that it was so melodically earwormy that they had had to. And I had a mission. And I was very, very fortunate to go to a performing arts high school where I was pretty much an out lesbian before there was any straight gay alliances or help from administration for lesbians all sleeping with each other. There was none. And then I moved here, and the punk scene here in '81 was dominated by fags. The kings of the scene were Biscuit and the Big Boys, Gary Floyd and the Dicks, David Dichter and MDC, and Chris Wing and Jerry's Kids. And there were these offshoots with women, with Whom Elements and in Houston and My Dolls, and there was incredible cross-pollination that took place with all of these bands, and to move from Houston to Austin and just have there be all of these queers, I just was like, oh, okay, look how easy it is. If you don't fear assassination, it's just like, you know, and so, music is very much an emotional part of my life. It's very, my feelings are very much tied in with it. But I think of it as propaganda. I very much think of it as propaganda. I've done a lot of studies of gospel and sacred work in terms of how these transgressive and controversial and maybe ideas that don't sit well inside of one can be come through the body, come through the ear, come through the driving, and you're humming something. That to me is a very important part of music, and I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Megz?
I'm Megz. I'm in a local band here called Magna, Carta, hip hop band, and I guess can't go too far back. My story starts in the 90s. I guess growing up there wasn't really, or I would say there wasn't too much to look up to in the queer community or the LGBT community, and so I was looking up to the women in hip hop and rap. And in the 90s, it was TLC, MC Lyte, and they have their like baggy jeans and like baggy jerseys, and so I could relate to that because I grew up a tomboy, and I'm like, oh, I can't be a rapper or I can't be a musician or an entertainer if I'm not this, if I'm not that. But then I can see these girls, and they're not lesbians, but I can identify with them because they look how I look, and they're talking about social injustices, just like I wanted to talk about. And then I guess as I got older, I grew up in New Orleans, so as I got older, the bounce music scene was like huge and it's dominated by gay men. So looking at that, I guess I figured, well, they're out, they're proud, they're singing about, whatever, rapping about whatever, and it was always a party with them. And I guess looking at that and being able to see that, I felt that I could do it too. But in the real world, I started looking at other models and seeing that maybe it's slightly different. Maybe I got a longer road ahead of me, and so I moved here to Austin for college. And I everybody says it, like when you get into college and you start learning so much, your whole mind frame kind of changes, and I was just like, oh, I'm gonna do whatever I want to do. Like, I'm gonna wear the baggy clothes, or I'm gonna wear the backwards hat. I'm gonna talk about what I want to talk about. And then it's easy in rap and hip hop because where that started was with a lot of social injustices. It's like pretty much the same thing, just a different, it's race instead of gender, or race instead of, sexuality. And so it was just changing the content a little bit, but the message is still the same. And so looking up to that, and then kind of looking up to the bounce artists that I had, and then like the feminine musicians, and like just bringing it all together, I was able to kind of find my place, and I was able to say, I can do all three of these things and still be, who I am, and still be authentic. And I don't really think I'll grow out of it, because now I see I see more and more where people are, you know, way more open, and it to me it's just authentic. It's and that's something that I want to kind of keep in my music, and I think that's something that you see in queer music is that it's just authentic. It's a unique story, it's a unique perspective, and no one can really knock an authentic story. You know, that's something that's gonna like live forever because it's so unique, and it's not the regular straight, you know, perspective. It's something different, and someone's always gonna be interested in something different. So I think that I'll probably just continue doing my thing and hopefully, you know, inspiring other people to continue doing their thing. And I don't think that the authentic message will ever die in queer music, and I think that's pretty much what sets it apart, or at least for me. So I think that's my take.
I feel like we have like the makings of a great mixtape here. Like, like went from like Queen to bounce music. Like that should be our homework.
Wait, Queen, Bikini Kill,
Jonesy.
And at 17.
I'm gonna check the time real quick. So,
How long do we have?
well, Curran said we can be kind of flexible. Yeah. We can't talk very much about rock music and the history of rock music without talking about cultural appropriation. So whether we're talking about Elvis doing Big Mama Thornton, or Madonna putting Willie Ninja in the Vogue video, Paul Simon reinvigorating his career by doing world music many times, or like the tension that's been going, or the kind of Twitter dialogue that's been going on around Iggy Azalea and Azalea Banks, Q-Tip and all these different people weighing in. It's something that is like kind of always at the forefront, I think, of pop music, and especially rock and hip hop music. And I want to make sure that we find a way to talk about that when we're talking about queer music as well. And I feel like for me, I really wanted to use this venue to talk about the politics of cultural appropriation, because I feel like this Austin queer music subculture is my subculture, and there's a lot of tension, I think, around issues of racial appropriation and racism in our subculture, and I want to like make sure that we make opportunities to keep processing and keep talking about it. And so, you know, a lot of that has crystallized around Christine, and particularly the way that Christine is a white performer working in a hip hop idiom, and using certain signifiers of blackness like the gold tooth, or certain kind of hip hop signifiers like the tooth. And so I know we've had conversations about this. We had the town hall last year, but I wanted to make a space to kind of talk about cultural appropriation and say, like, is there a middle ground between like all appropriation is bad, and no one should appropriate anything from any other cultures, or there shouldn't be any like, and like everything is up for grabs, you can use it and take it out of its historical perspective and use it however you want. And if there is some middle ground, like, can we kind of talk about like how we would define that middle ground? Like, and I just want to, as a white person, say, like, for me, this is a really real question as an academic, because my first academic work was around Paris is Burning, and a kind of identification with the performers in Paris is Burning that I think then caused me to go learn a whole bunch of stuff about African American culture so I could understand like what was going on in that movie. And so I think, you know, I'm asking this question from a perspective of being really open to the radical potential of cross-cultural borrowing, but also wanting to say, like, obviously not all borrowings are created equal. So like, what makes something respectful, productive, and not exclusive feeling? Because like right now I feel like in our music subculture a lot of people feel alienated and left out. So I'm not gonna say, like, I don't think we have to go around and like do the everybody, but I just want to kind of let people respond and share some thoughts about that, if you have some thoughts about cultural appropriation and borrowing.
I'll jump in. I always say, yeah, punk is based on black blues a few generations back, but what do you want me to do, river dance?
Yes.
Legally, that's all I might be allowed to do. I mean, you know what I mean? And I'm interested, then I don't do anything. Okay. So, I think what I want to keep in mind is attention, awareness, listening, talking to people about like what works for other people, and really like how to, if we're gonna incorporate each other's culture and make like something really interesting and new, then how do we make each other feel welcome at our art event, you know, or our art project, you know, without tokenizing. You can't be like, well, I have this one black friend who play, you know, you can't do that. So what do you do? Well, I'm going to go to this event that I know I'm going to be the only white person there, and I'm going to stay in the back, and maybe I'm going to talk to a few people afterwards, and then maybe invite some performers to come to my thing and see, you know, so that what I don't want to have is like all people of color on stage and all white people in the audience, or like have one person of color or one trans person like in my band, you know. So what can I do? And it can be really challenging because I can reach out, and at some point, you know, I'm like, okay, I don't have any trans people of color pals that want to be in my gypsy punk band. Okay, and maybe I can get some diversity to come in, like jump in on a song once in a while, create a format like where people could just come in and do a song. Every show, you know, you have different people come in and it's just really open and community based or something. But we're gonna have to use our imaginations. We're gonna have to come up with some new shit. And if we do want to incorporate other people's cultures into our art, then we have to do it with attention and respect and admiration and name the people that we got it from. Yeah. You know, and say, like, I know what I'm doing, and I'm actually doing this as an homage. And here's how I'm queering it, and be willing to discuss it and be willing to take criticism. You know, I think one of the scariest parts of being an artist, or being anyone, anywhere, is to be able to take criticism and be fluid and be willing to change.
That's good advice.
I'm soliciting. I don't know if it's advice.
Yeah, no, I'm like, one of the things I kind of do post making music is I do a lot of performative work, and like a new piece that I'm working on, I'm showing a recent piece on Saturday night. It's a dance piece that I choreographed, but a new piece that I'm working on is an ensemble piece with 3 dancers, and I'm trying to decide how I want to cast it. And it's all these kind of questions are coming up, and not wanting something that embraces a lot of different ideas and different races, different gender construction, but how to do that with also not feeling like you're putting together like a Benetton ad, you know, where it's like you're emblematic of all these different. I think that's really the best advice is like be open, try it, have a conversation, talk about it, because on an intellectual level, when you're talking about appropriation, everything is up for grabs, and it should be, and we should, it should be an open conversation, and the only way to do that is to throw it in there. I mean, if you're too resistant, or you're too holding back and being afraid of like, I'm afraid to try this because I might offend this person, or I might step on this person's feelings, like then the conversation, it's not gonna change, it's not gonna happen. So it's something I'm thinking about a lot. So.
I'm gonna see if Megz and Gretchen want to say anything before I start letting people from the audience chime in.
I'll say some words. I know for hip hop, it's like a really big thing right now. Like you mentioned with Zelia Banks and Iggy, and for me, it's just I don't know. It's kind of hard to say what the rules are for appropriation. Not to say that there even are any rules for appropriation. I think it's all about kind of, like you said, how it comes across. Is it respectful? Is it tasteful? Does it seem like something, you know, unique to your perspective and kind of like how you put it together? 'Cause, for example, when Eminem came out rapping, he's one of my favorite rappers, you know, definitely in my top 3. And it's because when you hear his stories, when you hear his music, you know it's the truth, you know it's, you know, again, authentic, and you don't even think about, oh, well, he's not black, or, you know, that doesn't even come across your mind, you know. But when you see things like twerking, which comes from bounce history, and Miley Cyrus did, and a lot of people freaked out about it. It was probably because it kind of seemed more like a mockery to some people versus like a true, you know, I'm doing this dance, and, you know, I researched it, and like I really, you know, really wanted to go out and do it. You know, I didn't think it was a joke or anything. And not to say that's what Miley Cyrus thought it was, you know. And I think people kind of get caught up in like, again, like kind of afraid to step out and just do it. And I think that if you know that your purpose, and you know that you're doing it with, you know, the intent to create something unique and, you know, creative, then it doesn't even cross your mind, and it doesn't even cross the audience's mind that you're doing something, you know, different, or you're pulling from other cultures. For example, I listen to a lot of Hector Lavoe, who's a, you know, big time salsa singer. They even say that he invented salsa. And so I listen to his music all the time, and I pull a lot of different things from there, but like no one would even like notice or even care to pay attention to it. Or no one, you know, says I'm trying to, you know, jip off of, you know, Hispanic culture or anything like that. It's just because I truly respect it, and I feel like it all kind of depends on how it comes across to the audience. And, you know, there's room in music and creativity for everyone, you know. And hip-hop is not a, you know, it may have been birthed, you know, from the black community, but it's not, you know, just for black people or just for, you know, this people. You know, it's a creative expression, and I think that everyone should be able to creatively express themselves, and there's no boundaries for that, I feel like. And like you said, if you're paying respect to it, and you're saying where you got it from, or you're saying what you were inspired by, you know, then it makes a huge difference of like how it comes across, I think. So,
as an English professor, I really like it when people cite their sources. I think you raised a really good point, which maybe has been missing from the conversation so far, when you're talking about bounce and Miley Cyrus kind of taking twerking out of its context. And that's, I think, when we're talking about people borrowing from hip hop, and especially queer people, because a lot of times queer people want to talk about shame and sexuality, is like we have to keep in mind this context that black women's bodies have been cast historically as overly sexualized and as sexual objects that are kind of free for the taking. And also black men have been, you know, portrayed in our culture as these like sexual beasts whose, you know, desires can't be contained. And so there's a lot at stake taking something like twerking, which is like has a particular New Orleans cultural context, and putting it at the Grammys or whatever without kind of thinking about what ideas people already have about black femininity, you know, that they're bringing to it, maybe because they haven't been in New Orleans experiencing what it means there.
I actually had to go and teach a class, but I wanted to leave you guys with this idea, and maybe you can tell me what ends up with the conversation. But maybe introduce the idea of, well, you know, we're talking about taking influences from other places that may be separate from, you know, who we are, different from who we are, and having license to do that as artists, and I'm down with that. I am curious though about the whole issue of, you know, white success with other cultures, with, you know, minority cultures. I'm thinking about that internet meme that's going around looking at how Macklemore has won more Grammys than, you know, Tupac and MC Light and, you know, all that stuff. So, you know, does it become an issue when we see a dominant culture become more successful than the non-dominant culture, you know, with their influences? And is it different if it's a queer white person doing it? You know, if it's a white person who's queer or a white woman who's doing it, is that different than a white man doing it? Is that different than a white woman, a white straight woman? Okay, so let me know.
You know, I'll just say this. I really think that being human is incredibly difficult, you know, and I have never been easy with it, with being a human and with being with other humans. And I mean this very seriously, because I was fed a diet of Beatrix Potter and fairy tales in a world of fantasy and places of escape that are very easy for me to go to, that don't have to do with taking criticism, don't have to do with taking responsibility, and something being pointed out where it's like, okay, fuck, I mean, that never occurred to me. I see your feelings are really hurt, and that like never crossed my mind. You know, that feeling of being caught, of being busted, and the worst is if you've had this sort of gregarious moment of it, and then one receives that. But I feel like that is just comes with the territory of humanity. You know, it just does. You know, it just freaking does. And we have so much to learn about being with each other. And I think it just is, I think it's inherently very, 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 very hard. And I do like to think that there's two things that queers have going and against us. One is profound defensiveness. So defensive, because a piece of criticism can feel like an invalidation to the very core. And I also feel like a thing that queers can have going for us is knowing what the fuck it feels like to be the underdog as a white person in a place where you're beaten for being a queer. And so one can extend some compassion to other humans, but I don't know how it's going to look in some great happily ever after time. And I feel like Disney has done me a profound disservice. And I'm serious, because I sometimes believe that there will be a happily ever after. And it's this second. This is freaking second. And it's the shitty seconds. You know, it's now, and it's just a kind of ceaseless processing. But everything you said about being open, everything that we're saying about that, with just with this knowledge that there's going to be a desire for expression, and it's inherently fraught. But would we rather, you know, would it be better if we didn't, you know, if we just, and then also I would just say, oh my God, that whole Madonna appropriating thing, I didn't know, whatever. Until I saw her doing on the music tour this country western cowboy Texas thing. And I just was like, well, you got that all wrong. You know, she totally had it wrong. And I was like, oh, I really, you know, get what this feels like if everything is fair game. Mm-hmm. You know, it's all fair game for my collage. Mm-hmm. And here's my collage.
Yeah, I think all of us have some version of that, of feeling like, wait, somebody co-opted my special thing.
Yes.
Kate Messer, you got your hand up back there.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of build off of Mocha's question and kind of dovetail a little bit into what Gretchen said. As we're framing this as queer lives, which to me is inherently subcultural, when did we start giving a fuck what the Grammys do?
Yeah, good point.
Seriously,
Good
or
point.
MTV, or any of that. Like, and in terms of, you know, Madonna appropriating, we reappropriate from Madonna. We re-steal from Britney. We, you know, punk rock aesthetics, we know were built off of gay male aesthetics. Right. You know, they were punks wanted to look outrageous, what's the most fucking outrageous you could look like? A Castro boy from the 70s, you know, and the leather cultures and things like that. And so we have to kind of realign, I think, some of our mindsets when we're worried about all these academic brouhahas about appropriation, this appropriation, that. It's like we're cleaning the table with a dirty cloth. We've been over these things so many times, and yeah, we have to re-clean the washcloth every time. But everything's about bricolage, especially in Western and American society. We're a fucking melting pot. You
Well,
know,
let me. Can I like jump in and play off of your little history that you? Because I mean, the other thing that is incredibly inspirational to punk is reggae,
which is a homophobic culture for the most part.
But you've got like some folks within punk who cited their sources and also performed with reggae performers and brought these Afro-Caribbean music subcultures into their punk subcultures, and some people who just kind of took the beat and didn't cite their sources, and then that music was fair game for skinheads to use, and like completely unaware that they're like, you know, bopping along to, you know, this Afro-Caribbean music while they're hating Afro-Caribbean people. So I don't think it's just academic. Like, I think it is really, there's real stuff at stake in terms of like where this music goes and what kind of like utopian or not utopian work it can do. And
well, no offense, but citing sources is like a real privilege buzzword. It's, you know, people who experience culture organically and then vomit it back out as an artist who maybe aren't running into academic roadblocks don't know a damn thing about citing sources.
Oh, maybe
you know,
I'll say giving props. Giving
well,
props
I mean,
to the people who
or even
inspired
understanding
you.
what that even means. That they just understand it as an organic part of what they've experienced.
I agree with that. It's like ignorance, you know. As an artist in high school, I thought my favorite photographer was Ann Getty. I mean, that is a huge embarrassing thing to say. Okay, but it's because like my teacher didn't show me any great artists. You know? So when the first person asked me, like, whoa, I know. I saw the book at CVS. I bought it for my sister-in-law. I had no other like names in my fingertips, you know. So that was my. So I didn't know what I was stealing from, but I was just stealing from probably everything, you know.
The best, I'll just wrap with one little last thing. The best answer I ever heard posed to a musician, that tedious question that every, you know, junior Rolling Stone wannabe says, which is, what are your influences? And it was a member of NRBQ, and he basically said, I'm not only influenced by the stuff I love, I'm influenced by the stuff I hate. So everything I've ever experienced influences me, so I don't understand the point of your question. And he said it in a lot more fun, exciting, less, you know, right away, but it was basically making the point that, you know, my influence is a reaction against as much as it is a reaction for. So, you know, I'm not going to cite sources of all the shit I hate or love, you know. I mean, it's just part of who I am. And yeah, I think it's important when it becomes cultural movement to embrace and invite in those elements that you have been inspired by. I think it's more about invitation than name checking and kudos and stuff like that.
Can I just jump in on one thing? On that thing, what the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, and those guys are like to just taking that music and you could die drunk in a fucking shack in the South while I live in a fucking castle in England.
Yeah.
The way to fucking give back is fucking throw money at the shit at least. You're like, hey, thanks. Here's some money. What do you need? $10,000, $50,000 bucks? That gonna last you, dude? Okay. Thank you. Dude wrote this song. Yeah, and then we did a cover. See, thanks. Now people just, not only do you not say anything, but you make all the money. That's what we were talking about before. It's like, I mean, whoever's gonna, you know, white people succeeding, white people getting Grammys, and then the other people that actually wrote the shit are like, you know,
Left out.
MC Hammer, everybody makes fun of him. Oh, you spend all your money, dude. Ha ha ha. Like, well,
It's
influence the
interesting that we're
generation.
spending there's so much time we could spend talking about race, but we haven't really gotten into class at all. And class is like almost like an issue that's so much easier to have, you know, the discussion about, because I mean that really is a big part of queercore. I felt like, I mean, it's like I grew up with a single mother. I don't know my father, and like everything was a reaction against men, and a certain class of men too, and it's just, you know, it's a whole different conversation, I know, and it's not one you posed, but it's something that we can all kind of get behind, I think, in a way that is you know, it's an easier conversation, I guess, in some ways, to talk about, you know, the 1% and our hatred for them, and you know, then the difficulty that comes up with all the discussion about race and gender, you know, so.
I'm gonna there's a question back here.
I think it's sort of been addressed, and it was sort of, you answered some stuff, but it was just talking, wow, I'm on the spot, sorry. Because you were bringing up class, and I keep thinking about hierarchy in the face of, and so when we're talking about, you know, borrowing and exchanging, it seems to be this sort of final product. So when you were mentioning like borrowing from leather culture and this, it's like thinking about the exclusions, the people that are not included in some of these subcultural things as an element of it, and also like when you're thinking of Iggy Azalea or Diane Twitter or any of these other groups that are using, it's like the face still becomes white. The face still becomes part of the system, and so there's this hierarchy that's created. So how do you elevate the faces as part of that representation? And so that's one of the things I was thinking of, is like, you have these groups, you have white on your skin, but then you have all these influences, and how do you, on a larger thing, like it's going from like subcultural groups to a much larger publicity scale, and there's that gap in between. So that's just, how do you address that? How do you deal with that mixed in between all of this?
I'm gonna take one more comment, and then I have one more question, so I want to move on to our last question. You have one more
Sorry.
It was really just kind of touching on what you were saying, and just, I guess the frustration comes with it when you're looking at class and race, and you're looking at, you know, these people who are like at the bottom, and they've been at the bottom all the time, you know, their whole lives, and Nas, Tupac, you know, those guys who, you know, are historical figures in terms of hip hop, you know, and they have no Grammys, and and you're just looking at like, if I guess it gets frustrating if you take from me and you never give anything to me. So for instance, queer culture, like the words we use and things we say, like for instance, slay, that's like the new one that, you know, is now like a very general term. People are like, if you're all dressed up and look nice and you're like, slay honey, like, you know, that's a gay term, and now everybody uses it, and it's kind of frustrating because you're like, well, I can't even get, you know, the right to get married, but you'll take and take and take from me, you know. And I guess it's, you have the, you know, the license to do whatever you want in terms of creativity, but I think you have to take into account, you know, where these people come from and what these people have been through, and the fact that there's nothing ever, you know, you're never giving anything to them. We're not getting Grammys. We're not getting, you know, as a queer artist, like, watching Sam Smith get Grammys, you know, was awesome, because it was just like, we don't get that. And finally, there's something we can have, and it's frustrating if you see people kind of taken from your sound or taken from your style, and nothing ever gets returned to you. And like you said, you know, you have the big house, you know, on the hill, and I'm still living in the slums of the ghetto, and I created your sound, you know. So I think it's really important to kind of keep that in mind, you know. At least, like you said, you may not know where your sources come from, but at least try not to be so ignorant about it, or try not to be, you know, blinded by, you know, investigate. Like, if I hear something, I want to know. I'm like big on history. We did these things for work at L-Style, and my thing was like looking back in the past to like bring things for the future, and so I'm like big on history and historians. So if I hear something, I'm trying to trace it all the way back as far as possible. So when people ask me what I'm influenced by or inspired by, I want to be able to put them onto this too. I want to be able to show them, you know, breakbeat and, you know, all kind of other different things that I take from, because I want to teach as well. Like, because I know people aren't hearing this. They're not hearing this on the radio. They're not seeing this, and those people deserve some credit as well. And so I think that's the main thing with appropriation, is to at least try. You know, with Iggy, she never really tries. She just wants to fight against it, and it's just listen. Like, this is where you got, just listen and just see and just learn with us. We're not trying to take it from you. We're just trying to get you to see where you got it from if you don't realize where you got it from. And I think that's just a small part of it, but.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about that whole Twitter conversation that's been going on around her is like all these people putting out this musical history, like in maybe for new generations of people who haven't heard it, saying like, oh, this is where hip hop actually comes from. It comes from a particular historical context. Well, I want to switch gears and talk about history, and I want to take a page from literally the book of our friend Anne Svekevich, and talk about queer music history. And I want to be a little bit literal and actually talk about queercore as a kind of specific historical musical moment. And in her book, Archive of Feelings, Anne talks about how traditional modes of doing history don't necessarily work for queer subcultures, because, you know, the things that are in traditional archives are like books that got published by known publishers, or records that got made, or films that got made and distributed by these big institutions, or even, you know, great men and the works of great men and the documents of legal things, all stuff that doesn't necessarily happen in queer subcultures. So we don't necessarily have those kind of officially recognized archives, but also some of the things that are really specific to queer culture, around that it's organized around who we have sex with and who we're intimate with, and also organized around something that's very ephemeral, like our communities and our subcultures, and who takes care of us when we're sick and brings us casseroles, and you know, all these things that maybe are not going to kind of get caught by the traditional archives. And so Anne talks about this idea of like the ephemera, which is in archives, the ephemera is all the stuff that like librarians don't, like, it doesn't fit into any of their known character categories, you know? So like, for me, I think of like the Ransom Center has Anne Sexton's sunglasses. You know, that's like in the ephemera collection. So I wanted to ask y'all if you were thinking about, and I'll open this after the panelists have a chance to answer. Y'all can answer as well, but if there was a piece of ephemera that for you kind of crystallized queercore and what it was, like, let's like put it in our little historical memory banks right now and make our little archive by just kind of maybe conjuring up a piece of ephemera. Oh, and I'll start. Just to give you an idea.
Them two, like, I don't know, cerebral,
Okay.
man. You and Anne talk about these like concepts. I don't know.
You're JoJo.
But I
Yes.
do what?
That would be
One of your
It's a
chopped
rubber
off
dick.
dildos.
It's a rubber dick.
You get to name it.
That's where I'm going with this question. Is Lynnee's rubber dick. Like for me, maybe it'd be, I used to have, I went to college in Seattle, and I used to have a Chainsaw Records t-shirt. Or no, not a Chainsaw Records, a Candy Ass Records t-shirt.
The cat?
The cat.
And the,
yeah.
and the, yeah,
Yeah, I wish I still had that t-shirt.
I have it in the storage unit.
Yeah. Like that's like one of my, because I was just like Team Dresch was my band. Like I was in love with them, and that T-shirt would be my piece of ephemera.
I would say the flyers probably is what and because I'd made all of our flyers, I was like the main visual kind of person who was always relating to the band that way, framing it around images, and there's a really good flyer of like a 70s guy with his legs spread and a butt plug up him, and I just like kind of drew all over. It was for a show at the Castro Street Fair, and we were asked to play a headline like a Castro Street Fair thing, which was such a disaster. And like,
I'm sure it was.
People hated us. I mean, everyone was like, it was like the classic Neil Young concert. Everyone was up front with their hands in their ears. And just I put that poster all over the Castro. And it was just like, and it's so much of that. Oh, I think it's probably so much of probably what we were reacting against too was like there it is. That's great.
Yes, so great. Main stage.
Let's see. Whoa, that's fucking in your face, pass around.
we were that was what I embraced, that in your face aesthetic that was supposed to be reacting against to like what was like the Castro Queens. You know? They were complete in antithesis to them economically, and just like what we were into, and that's I think a really interesting part of homocore is that it wasn't just against who everybody was sort of fighting against, but it was also internal. There was like a lot of internal struggles against people in your own community that you're reacting against, and down the road it sort of created a lot of weird feelings for me afterwards. Like there's sort of an internalized kind of homophobia, but also like I was serious about it when I did it. I was like, I hate these people, like these queens in the Castro with their shopping bags, and just like just offended me on so many levels. And a lot of what we were reacting to was the entertainment that they were into, and I was so I remember just saying, it's like, God, if one more drag queen gets up and does a Judy Garland song, I'm gonna fucking die. I'm gonna fucking kill myself. Now I've come around to really love that. But at the time, I was really reacting against that, and so that was a big part of what we were kind of going for. You too. I'm sure. There was so much of it was reaction. Just like wanting to, we were really bratty, and we encouraged that. So anyway, that I would say the flyers. Getting back to your question.
Awesome.
Yeah, I guess flyers. I love having. Like I used to peel flyers off telephone poles in the '80s, and stick them up on my wall. And I still have them with masking tape and everything. That was before other people just tore them down, and I was like, how are we gonna find out where the shows are? And then the internet came, thank God. But yeah, I would say ephemera. People, the first time I cut off my dick, because I was confused about my gender. I didn't know if I want to have a dick or cut it off. I was like, anyway, I'll work on that one. I was gonna go into my comedy routine, but it doesn't. That's not gonna work. But yeah, you'd have to sing the song that was about the blowjob before you sang the song about cutting off the dick. Because if you did it the other way around, then you get to go and it was wrong. So you go, oh damn, forget it. Never mind. Next song. But anyway, so the first time I did it, and I threw it to the crowd because I was wielding the knife, but I only had one dick, so what was he gonna do? So if I cut that off, I wasn't gonna be able to do this song, or if I was, it just wouldn't be as good for the rest of them. When we were in Atlanta, so there was like a lot more shows, no dick, and I was like, after that, of course, I brought a bag of rubber dicks. But, and then you can make a dick last like 3 fucking shows. Balls, dick, stub, I don't know what. But anyway, and then there was the time when we tried to cross the Canadian border and they looked in the bag of rubber dicks, and it was like one of those Walmart bags, and it was kind of all jiggling, and then the one looked in, and then they were all hunched over looking in, and the bag was jiggling. Yeah, but anyway, so we get to New York, and somebody was like, look what I have. And they had the fucking balls or the dick or something. They're like, it's on my altar at home. And that's some like queer punk homocore fucking altar with a rubber dick on it. And I was like, that's really gross. I mean, I don't even know where that went after it left my hand. That was a gnarly ass fucking all ages fucking filthy ass pit. And you, okay. But I was honored that they thought that thing was important. And yeah, I bounced many dicks off of people's heads from then on. It was a lot of fun. I do want to say about posters though, and who has power and who influences who and who's taking what cultures back and forth from each other. And one of my favorite posters was this like silk screen of Tri-Bait and 7-Year Bitch who played in LA. And they were, of course, they were the headliners. They were the bigger band. They were all straight that we knew of. I think the drummers,
Yeah, the drummer, yeah.
Hang out with a couple people,
Yeah.
on the side in the back room.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you gotta kiss with Valerie.
Valerie, man.
Yeah, Valerie,
Damn
all the
it.
dykes wanted her.
Oh
She's like,
shit,
"Ah,
she's so fucking cute.
But anyway, so their poster was totally an homage to like dykes. You know, it was like fucking gnarly death bitch, fucking machine gun, fucking dyke, just like, rah. Is that my like timer that says shut up? Okay. But anyway, it was like 7-Year Bitch and Tri-Bait, and then this like gnarly chick pointing the machine gun with like all these fucking flames coming out at the viewer. It's like really bad feng shui. I had it on my wall and I was like, where can I put this where it's gonna work? No, it's all about violence pointed at me. Okay. That's the way. But anyway, so straight people are also influenced by queer culture. I think we're all influencing each other, and I think that the place that we want to get to is a place where we're all freely and lovingly exchanging influences and giving homage to each other as we do.
My archive is massive. I literally have been collecting since I was 14. So, and queercore to me was already after the early 80s, Big Boys, blah, 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 all that stuff, post 2 Nice Girls and all of that. So it was a little bit of a blip for me. It wasn't this huge thing because there had been all that had preceded it. So I have Candy Ass, Chainsaw, you know, I've got tons of singles. I have a bunch of posters. I have all of that stuff. And I feel like, I also used to work for a fellow who dealt in movie posters, and that was a very early job of mine, was contextualizing work, because he was selling collections to universities of this ephemera that was not valuable at all, because these movies had not done well. But he was putting it in a context, and he was selling $4 press books for $25, and that completely shaped my way of looking at what my archive is. So I would say that right now, what I'm extremely excited about are my negatives, my film negatives from, you know, being lovers with Teresa Taylor, who wasn't in the Butthole Surfers yet, you know, wasn't this face of like the lesbian in that band on the very first Ludwig kit that I bought her that she was supposed to paint back and she never did. You know, like a fuzzy fucking neg in our apartment on, you know, 11th. Those kinds of, what these negatives are going to mean in terms of already, you know, a history from, you know, circa 1982 on up, my 5 billion photos of Lynn, Gretchen, and Anne looking at each other lovingly, and very much what I'm interested in are friendship networks that may not be known. Just from when you look at Vanity Fair and you see that these writers and intellectuals were you know, sharing a summer home in 1923. That to me, who gives a fuck if it's even a good photo, which is my sort of caveat for not having to worry about that part, is that it's just really what the you know, who the players are. And I think that this intersection that I've had my whole life, my whole creative life, is, you know, everything I dreamt of as a child, to be able to be with people who were artists and who were making things. That's all I wanted. And that, you know, that dream has come true, and that dream is as sweet as I thought it would be when I was a kid. And who knows if a Bastrop wildfire or a Katrina will wipe that archive out. I still have, you know, my memories of these things. But I would like to see some kick-ass looking posters and zines and, you know, all of that kind of stuff, you know, housed someplace besides the house down the street where people could, you know, sort of look through it.
Megz, I don't know if you were born yet in the height of Queercore, but does it bring up anything for you just talking about the artifacts and these pieces of ephemera?
Artifact makes it seem really long.
Our petroglyphs, can you relate?
Yeah, I was not around during that time, but I did. I had this really cool David Bowie T-shirt that I gave away, and I still regret it to this day because it was pretty badass, and he was just looking like himself with the hair and the tights and all the good stuff, and I gave it away, and I think it's a badass shirt. I should get back.
We should all just make quilts from our t-shirts. Stop getting rid of them.
Next year, the queer crafting should be t-shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, your queer ephemeral quilt.
It's interesting you bring up ephemera because the major academic institutions, which are archive, has become a very different thing right now. And when the curator at a major institution was looking through my archive, there's all the political stuff, all the, you know, and then he went, oh my God, and he pulled out a Two Nice Girls t-shirt. Now most people that I know would say, what? But this gay curator at a major institution, that's what excited him. The other thing was a 50s t-shirt that I had. There was a pop star named Johnny Ray who had a huge hit. And there was a photograph that circulated around him of him blowing someone. And there was a t-shirt made in 1964 of this. That was the second thing he put on. And he went over the Madame New poster, t-shirt, to pull out the Johnny Ray. So this ephemera, you know, I think that the queering of all this stuff, I mean, I think it's really important that we remember that is, Lynnee said it in the very beginning about how the queering of what the dominant culture thinks is important. So the posters, you know, that Fagbash poster, and there's so many of those kinds of posters, and they predate Queercore. You know, for someone my age, there's a history beforehand.
Right.
We need to acknowledge that. But I'm really excited, and I hope that you know, Gretchen's collection gets to one of these kinds of institutions, because that tells more about who we are than a lot of the stuff that's written and published, even in academia. It really tells about our lives and how we walk down the street, how we build community, how we take care of each other, and how we say "fuck you" publicly. You know?
Yeah, if any of you make it to Los Angeles, I really encourage you to go to the Wine Institute at USC. It's the most remarkable resource and collection of ephemera that I've ever. I mean, it's the biggest in the world, but you can go in, you walk in, and see whatever, you know, make an appointment to see whatever you want, and everything's online. It's just, it really is. It's mind blowing how much. So, and you know, down the road, if you, it's a great place to go.
Oh, believe me, I've hung out there.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Don't throw anything away.
Yeah, don't throw anything away.
Great, the best advice from my hoarder father. Don't throw anything away. Surely there's a way we can queer this, right? And monetize.
Curran, I think you're kind of a collector as well. I'm wondering if you have an artifact that comes to mind.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of hard to pick.
You don't have to pick one.
Thing. I mean, I guess for me, it would be, I have one of the first, the Huggy Bear, who was a riot girl Queercore band back in the day. I have their record, which is one of the first things that introduced me. I just randomly came across it at a record store in Boston. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I basically would always just kind of like probably a lot of people do, go through the record store and look for anything that had like something that seemed like gay on the cover, or something that seemed like not heteronormative, not straight in some ways, like as a young teenager. And for me, like sort of like, I'm not that young, but I was young enough that I kind of just missed the queercore movement in terms of being able to be a part of it, because I was in high school, like in a tiny town, and had no real access to it. There was obviously before the internet at that time and so forth. So my introduction was all like sort of by accident, like stumbling across like Bikini Kill, stumbling across Huggy Bear and all of that kind of stuff. And then, you know, really, I'm kind of going down your question, but really that sort of influenced in so many ways this festival for sure. Kind of everything that I've done is that sort of feeling like I missed out on this really amazing thing, and I want to do my best to kind of create something that's in that vein or create something similar. So that's sort of kind of how Outsider came about in a lot of ways, was this, even if it's like this sort of nostalgic overestimation or whatever about what this like queercore community or what Riot Girl or all these things are about. So I guess to circle back, it would be that first Huggy Bear record that kind of introduced me to it all, even though I didn't even really know what it was at the time, or that it was part of any kind of movement, or what it was. It was just something so different, and that really spoke to me as a little young queer kid who didn't have a connection to most of the community out there. Yeah.
Other folks in the audience?
It's funny when you said that, I just had a rush of feeling, because it isn't the artifacts that I have, it's the experience. Because my experience of kind of queercore and Riot Girl were really from a suburban rage. So being in a suburban environment that was very restrictive, very homophobic, like with violence. So being in the car, having a safe space, blasting the music and driving to meet my other community, that's the thing that just rushes to me when I think of the ephemera, is really just the feeling of it.
And that's oral history, you know, which is a part of ephemera too.
Yeah, and I mean that actually really speaks to Anne's work as well, because she's not even just talking about the physical ephemera, but these like transient feelings that are hard to capture.
And that feeling of liberation through rage, you know, which I feel like was really prevalent in queercore, is feeling like I can have this feeling, I can feel this rage and feel fully realized in it and embodied.
That's hip hop. That's hip hop.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you for having this conversation about this, because this is really important that we don't lose our history with the access to internet at our fingertips, and with everything being online and so readily available in PDF format or whatnot. In MP3s and whatnot, but there's so many discs, you know, that haven't been converted to MP3s now. You know, there's erotic magazines like On Her Backs and the Quam magazines that, you know, have this rich history of articles of progressive stuff, that we're having these same conversations today and we think that we're progressive because we're doing it online, you know, we're reaching this entire world, but like we have this rich history that goes back and back and back, and these conversations that are just lost, and I'm thank you so much for having this conversation. This is cool.
Anybody else want to add in?
You know, I just wanted to say that as someone from my generation who's watched all of this grow over the years and still feel part of it, even though I'm not 15 when you were 15, it's really important to talk amongst ourselves about what went on before, because a lot of it isn't preserved, or if it's preserved, it's not in the canon, so to speak. And it's really important to realize that sometimes when you think you've invented something, someone else has had that idea before, you know, and to have that conversation, because it's the continuity of the conversation and the personhood. I mean, the intimacy of this way this is organized, which is so different from most things I've ever been at. And you know, and the selection of the people that are here, here, and here. Each of our experiences is important, and we may tell our girlfriend or our boyfriend or the few people we know, but when we sit in a room with strangers who come together for some sort of common interest, it's so, I don't know about you, but my little heart here is like really excited, Curran, by this format, and to see Gretchen look at Lynnee and know what Lynnee meant to her, and see Lynnee talk to Jonesy about the fucking poster. You know, that doesn't happen on the internet. You know, it really doesn't.
Right. You know, but at the same time, there's surprising things that pop up. The New Yorker, over the last decade, has done 2 articles about the lesbian separatist community in Northampton, and it just comes out of nowhere, and it's just like this treasure chest that just pops up. So, it is random.
Well, it's random and it's never going to encapsulate it all. I mean, there's the specificity of the moment in the car, and then there's somebody else having that, and that's what's so beautiful about art and conversation. I just literally can't sit in front of the computer. It's not, my back hates to sit. It's not something that I like to do. And I do love to, to talk with people, and I love the way that it tears me up, like what you're saying about and also just shout out to Jim Ferrat, putting me on the map, man. I love you, Jim. Appreciate it enormously. And being able to not have it be mediated, because when you look at that single at the record store for something that signifies something kind of not heteronormative to you, I love my iPod. I didn't think I would, but every song is the same font. So that equalization through that, where there isn't that human touch, there isn't that I miss that sort of experience. And so I mean, I really can't. I love it as far as being reactionary, because honestly, in a certain way, by the time of Queercore, I needed to fucking calm the fuck down from my reactionary stuff. So that was a little bit more 82 and sort of less 92. But my reactionary stuff regarding a kind of web and a fallacy that all things are contained there, and that is a kind of communication that is, especially in terms of hurting somebody's feelings, I actually dare you to say to somebody's face what you anonymously post. I dare you to sit in this room and call somebody out in that fashion, as a human to human. And so your beautiful continuing sort of enumerating that this is about something that's not living on the web in that way, I really appreciate it, because that's like a huge part to me of this world, because all the kick-ass Photoshop posters that live online, they're not going to be ending up in the Beinecke. It's because it's taking up space in the folder at home that it's going to be there. But it's, to actually print something out and to make the material, that's, we're not in that world in that same way. I mean, we're still humans having experiences, but, viva la, actually being in a room full of people.
I think we also need to honor the people that like when y'all, which was this 2 gay men,
yes,
who from Memphis did country western music in a dress and looking like the American primitive poster. That took a lot of guts.
Yes.
And then they moved back south.
Yeah.
And you don't always become successful. You don't always become successful. But the fact that space was open for someone else to come in, and whether you like the dude or not, the guy who comes out in country western music, who's a big Grammy winner, that still is a big fucking deal in that world, the woman, Shelley, who was the artist of the year, never worked again. Was never played again on radio. Never played again on radio. She was the artist of the year in country western music. So I think we should also do whatever it is that's being transgressive now. And this is where Christine, I was surprised to hear this critique of Christine, Paige, coming from you. I mean, I don't know if it's yours, but maybe that's what's around. But I think Christine is very much like Tribe 8. It just, so many fags hate her, because she just pushes things in their face, literally, that, that nobody wants to deal with, like butt fucking, like butt fucking, And I think that that's what Tribe 8 did. You know, it made you, you know, I don't know, maybe it didn't make you uncomfortable, but it certainly, when that knife came out, I suddenly felt very male. You know? Wait a minute, you know, the Mabue in San Francisco, I suddenly like, you know, I wanted my, what are those merkin things if they have them for guys or whatever, that protect you. But you know,
Cod piece.
no, but it's that kind of moment, and that's the queering.
Yeah.
That's the queering, and if we lose that, you know, in hip hop, when I saw Goddess for the first time, and whatever,
Goddess and She.
yeah, you know, they didn't fucking care whether they were accepted in that world or not. They took their space in it, you know, and the same thing with the bounce people. I mean, bounce has been appropriated, sure, but you know, what's the one on is that one guy on Fuzz or what's that?
Big Frida. Big Frida.
Yeah. Big Frida. Now, Big Frida, if anyone was at South by Southwest last year, Big Frida was on this panel with that person from RuPaul's show who was really obnoxious and did a show. I can't remember what the queen's name was. But Big Frida was the most popular show on that network. Because Big Frida's fucking heart is as big as his ass, you know? and that's part of the queering of it too, you know, it just, you know, so all of this, I think we need to sometimes just acknowledge, wow, this one did that, this one did that, this one did not commit suicide, this one did not OD, you know, this one did not, you know, because we know those other stories, and thank you, Curran, because I think that this kind of conversation generates, you know, memory. Repressed memory and our own repressed memory.
I actually went, like, going back to what you were saying originally, because you made me remember, and gave me a sort of surreal moment in that, I'll try not to get emotional about it, when you're referencing y'all, and Gretchen as well. One of my very first CDs that I ever owned was this compilation called Out Loud, which was like a queer music compilation. It came out in like '93 or something.
It'll hurt.
Yeah, all was on it.
Yeah.
Gretchen Phillips was on it. Girls in the Nose was on it. All those songs are still in my iPod, and like, that was like, awesome. That was one of my first CDs. That was one of my first introductions to like all these like queer music people singing these like, queer songs. It was so influential on me and so huge. I mean, I think the song you were singing about like Peace Park,
Tricking in the
here
Park
in Austin, right? So, like,
Peace Park.
so it's just you just gave me this really surreal moment of like, oh my god, it's like 20 years later, and here like Ginny Bird's here and Gretchen's. Oh god. Here we are. I couldn't think that this would happen. It's really great. So thank you for being here.
It's just these friendships, you know, it's just fandom. Like, I'm just so blessed to be such a big fan. As self-centered as I am, I have so much fandom inside of me and so much excitement about people's work. And such a thrill to be able to, you know, for us to just stand on each other's shoulders and all of the shoulders that we've stood on before.
I think that's a really good point. Is as much as we've looked back and we were rebelling against generations that came before us, just like teenagers did against parents. There's a phase that you go through. It's part of growing up. It's like, I have to differentiate myself. Okay, so I'm different than you. You did some cool shit, but you're old hat now. Bye. Next, we're the next new cool thing. We're doing it right, and you're actually stupid and dumb and fucked up and old and just go away. You know, that's what we were basically saying. And it was fucking rude, and as you pointed out, dismissive. And now the youngsters want to be like, don't say tranny. Fuck you, man. I said tranny when you was in diapers, bitch. Shit, you know, and it's like, okay, well, at the same time, I have to look to the next generation and be like, okay, what are we saying now? Okay, very good, you're creating anything, okay. You know, you have to become the parent at some point, you know, and be magnanimous. But also too, I think that what you were saying about being queer and about class is that, and about queering things is that you are coming from a place of not having privilege, right? So if you're Christine or whatever, you can kind of feel like I get to do anything because I'm at the bottom of the heap. And if I am a white male, I'm going to throw that privilege away. And I'm going to go and drag, and I'm going to go and scare drag, and I'm not going to sing Judy Garland. And how about I put on a gold tooth, and how about I'm like crack whore, and now I'm like homeless. And all this, wait. You can't, you know, and it's like, at some point, and there you go back to your original thing of like, what is the middle ground? Can we say like, anarchy, punk rock, does not have rules. At the same time, let's have awareness. You know, like if you're gonna do all that shit, be like, yes. And the reason I'm saying the homeless crack whore, and the gold tooth, and then singing the hip hop, and then tears from a pussy is because, and then be able to expound on that shit. Don't be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I just made that up. You can't do that. You know, you have to be able to. You can give props or cite sources, or talk about it, or say like, yes, I'm really paying homage to giving up privilege, and I'm really pointing out how white male privilege in the world is a problem. And if you're born with a dick and you say, I'm actually gonna be like, no thanks to that privilege, that's a problem, isn't it? You're triggered now, aren't you? Let's talk about it. You know, so I just say let's all be aware of the art that we're making and why we're making it and what our intention is and how we want to fucking change it.
I also have a question too, because if you can look at Christine and see all that, like, does Christine have to say it? You know what I mean? Like, at a certain level, I can understand why an artist would want to sort of have this mystery or sort of let people have their own interpretations of the work and wouldn't therefore want to say, like, this is the definitive thing that I'm trying to do, and might just want to give that sort of like, oh, you know, whatever, I'm just doing it. But like, if the people that are listening to it can see, like, if you can see all those layers in what they're doing, like, doesn't that mean something? And like, how can we talk about that related to this?
If somebody with less privilege is going to question you on it, you need to be prepared to discuss.
Yeah.
And you need to be prepared not just to defend, but to explain yourself and to try to connect with another person and say, how can my art help you? You know, that's what Tribe 8 did fucking in 94 in fucking Michigan. And people were like, that's violent. And you can't cut the rubber dick off. I'm triggered. Oh my God. And it's anger. Oh shit. And I'm like, yeah, if you're not angry, what's the problem? You obviously have a problem. And now you're just going to go burn some incense? Really? That's your fucking problem? And they're like, oh, you know, we'll go get some rubber dicks and chop them up at home. Actually, right. And, you know, but it was like having to listen to people and like, why were they triggered? Why were they traumatized? What was the problem for them? This is before the whole transition happened. So, like, I will say that, yes, we were there dealing with other things. People were dealing with SM, people were dealing with race, dealing with class, doing all kinds of things. A lot of shit got discussed there. And I hate to even bring up Michigan because every time you do it's like, oh, you're a transphobe? No. I was over at Camp Trans, like, trying to, like, facilitate conversations. I got tired. Okay, so I left. But, you know, and Ann Speck bitch and I took many walks in the woods and solved all the problems of the world.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Because
here we are.
I love the conversation about archive, of course, but it's coming back around to feelings in a good way. And this is maybe a question I will be meditating on over these next few days, having just... I drove through a fucking snowstorm at 4 a.m. in Ithaca, New York to get here. And yesterday I was in the archives at Cornell looking at the papers of a black gay man who died of AIDS, whose plants are in the archive and the poems that he never published and so wanted to be in the world. And he gave that archive to the archivist the day before he died, including like an orange pillowcase with porn slides of black gay men in it. Really amazing. So I feel like I just met, you know, a friend in the archive there. And what I'm thinking about is I'm hearing the words in your face and anger. I really appreciated Paige's comment in the context of also talking about the love and talking about these direct connections that many of us have. It's so nice to be home and also to have visitors here in Austin. So how do we hold those together? I think, Lynnee, that's what you're talking about. That's what brought us together many years ago around the question of triggers, trauma, dicks, performance, women's land, etc. So these feelings have a lot of history. And I want to be thinking about what outsider means now. So because, you know, Curran and I also have had an intergenerational discussion. Curran helped me teach in my class. And so, you know, he's from the 90s. I'm like, was already ancient by the 90s, and we're teaching these young kids for whom 90s is, you know, the past. And so what does outsider mean now, and where do we bring the love and the anger together? What are the moments where we need to have that space in the car or with other people to just blow off steam and also to say fuck you to the world? But where does that then sometimes get us stuck or smaller, where we also need to look around and see who's in the room that we're getting angry with and who's not in the room, and how can we use that that anger to ultimately make us bigger and more loving, to be able to get our heads out of our asses sometimes and ask, am I in a room with all white people? Do I need to be thinking about that? I feel small, or I feel like I need my subculture to be able to survive from one day to the next. But where else do I need to be making connections beyond the living room of my friends, which is such a valuable resource. I don't want to take that away from anybody. So how can we think, outsiderness, like who loves that concept, who feels drawn to that concept, and who doesn't? And what in 2015 can we say about that, building on these multiple generations of outsiderness and queerness? I think, that's just the question I want to ask myself, because of the ways in which there is, I think, a lot of infighting of different kinds going on. Some of it's generational, some of it's racial, some of it's about trans versus, other kinds of identities. I don't want my heart to be broken by it. I want to be able to hold, I don't get angry. So my sadness, other people's rage, my love, to bring it all to the table, and then to do some work in the world. Like, how can we claim our outsiderness, but also not just, live in the subculture. I think we have to let the subculture make us big enough to, build some connections and bridges.
I want to put a word in for Shane, because I think that his performance deals with some of the class and issues, and he's from New York, and you may not know his work, but Curran put him in the show. I also want to make sure we allow our artists to grow, and not get stuck. I mean, you grow, you learn, if you do it, the sort of dialectic that Lynnee's talking about listening and figuring out. And you know what? Sam Smith is the most popular singer in the world at the moment. He's 23 years old. He came out and he wrote a song about his boyfriend that left him. And he said that out loud. Now, I think Fagbash had something to do with that. No, I'm serious. I think all the work that we do, and so when people dismiss it, enough people dismiss him anyway from homophobia. I don't have to like his music, I happen to think he's got a great voice, but let's own this big tent here and say, we did this. From my age, I look at the children and the grandchildren, and I say, we, all of us collectively, Lynnee, Alex Stopkin, Toshi Reagan, Nitra Johnson, the women at Michigan, the people outside the women at Michigan, we all did this that makes this moment that someone like a Sam Smith can come out, because it's much easier for a pop woman to come out than it is for a pop male to come out. And I'm not saying we have to, become that, but we did this. We created this world, and I think that fundamentally changes something. It makes possible a different vision. You talked about vision, and the capital industry, music is always going to have a Georgia Gibbs and a Pat Boone, and they were the 50s singers who made millions of dollars off of the black singers, and they just imitated. They didn't bring, the appropriation and make it their own. They imitated, and that's the critical difference between appropriation. Is it an imitation, or is it something that is a synthesis that takes from and creates something new?
I am really conscious that PJ and Curran need to go pick up some artists at the airport. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I'm really just thrilled that we got to have this great conversation, and I especially want to thank the artists.